TRICHOMES Weekly Roll Up, where we cover the latest in federal legalization topics and cannabis news headlines. This week, in Oregon, new cannabis laws went into effect with the new year, while other cannabis laws are awaiting in the wings for springtime and summer activation. In Illinois, cannabis sale numbers were reported for 2021, showing a more than 2 times purchase increase from 2020. And in the state of New Hampshire, the Republican controlled House passed GOP sponsored cannabis reform, allowing possession and home cultivation. And now, here are your hosts, John Bond and Jarod Duggins.
What's
Mr. Bond,
happening, dude?
how are you doing over there in Oregon?
I'm doing very well, man. Happy New Year to y'all down in Southern California. I'm certain you guys are a little warmer than we are up here right now, but that's okay because we have mountains to snowboard and ski, so it's not terrible. How you doing?
I don't know if they haven't told you, but we have a couple mountains around here to snowboard and ski as well. But
I know. You got a couple.
It started off at 39 this morning, and it's about 70 right now. So I don't know. It's
Wow. What is the closest mountain to the Trichome's office? So I guess it would be Big Bear, right?
Big Bear, Baldy's
Yeah.
around. But
Okay.
yeah, Big Bear would be the closest. Yep.
Totally.
And they got some good snow and.
I had a legendary yard sale in Big Bear about 5 years ago off a jump out there that I think my left shoulder is still like pops out of socket every now and again. But talk about just like there's really no better spot to spring ride out there. You know?
Oh yeah, it's
Totally, man.
you can get out in the snowboard and just the shorts and it depends on how you take the cold. But yeah, I've ridden in just jeans before and. Actually,
well, how you take the cold and how much you fall, because like taking a wipeout and a t-shirt, you only get a couple of those before it's not fun anymore. So it's not a bad deal.
Wet and windy is not where you want to be on the mountain, right? Yeah,
totally, man. So we got a great show for folks this week. Obviously, first one back in the new year. A lot of things happening on the policy side. One thing I'll probably kick us off here with my home state of Oregon, as we were mentioning it.
Awesome. Yeah.
But most recently, the Oregon Liquor Control and Cannabis Commission, the OLCC, approved various adjustments to adult use cannabis on a panel discussion December 28th in reaction to the state's quickly expanding cannabis program. The OLCC's regulations took effect on New Year's Day. And then some of those modifications, as we know, with cannabis regs won't take place until 2023. But I know me personally, as an Oregonian, as we kind of get into some of these data points here, it's exciting, right? Because the more that we start to kind of relax the reins a little bit on adult use products in terms of like THC per product and the amount that you're able to buy in a single transaction, I think we can we open the door to a lot cooler products, if you're someone like myself or you, obviously a 2 milligram edible doesn't really do much for you. But, folks like my parents who actually mentioned, by the way, over Christmas, my mom was like, could you stop mentioning me as someone that sounds like so out of touch with cannabis? I'm like, Mama, I promise. And I hope she hears this. It's not that she's out of touch. She's just, very much in that kind of curious demographic, as we like to call it. But, opening the door to getting some stronger products in the single use environment where you don't have to eat an entire chocolate bar to feel the effects of it, because obviously that's got its own hangups there from a nutrition standpoint. So thoughts on that, man?
Oh yeah, no, coming from the old school where 450 milligram edibles were available, and hey, they were either a hit with the growers crowd and the people we were hanging around with, or you heard horror stories about people trying to shower it off with their clothes on, in the shower, trying to get up so high.
And, totally been there.
You got to walk people through that, and much like your mom, I have somebody who through my grandmother is wanting to get into cannabis, and they asked about gummies, they asked about this, and really the reason for the regulation in the beginning is because the masses of people who are coming to cannabis going to get their socks knocked off if they go in after 100 milligrams, right? It's going to be a bad experience for everybody. End up probably trying to sue somebody, they're over intoxicated, all that kind of thing. So you got to walk people up the ladder, and that's primarily what it's for. But it was kind of unfair to the people, especially, hey, recreationally, if it takes you 100 milligrams or more, more power to you, right? That's a choice, it's a tolerance, that kind of thing. But on the medical side, there's people who need that dosage, who
Mm-hmm.
thrive on 100 milligrams plus. And much to your point is, as much as I love Kiva edibles, shout out to Kiva and the Caminos, eating a whole tin of them to get my 100 milligrams it's going to rot my teeth out even more than it has, based upon how much I like candy because of edibles.
Totally. Well, it hurts your stomach, and that's not a bad thing, right? So it's interesting because, so many people, especially if you've been a user of cannabis for a long time and you've been one that partakes, it's,
Right.
Everyone's had that bad edible experience earlier on in their cannabis, like I call it career, but you don't have to work in
Right.
cannabis. Everyone's had a bad edible experience. Like, and almost always those are driven by homemade edibles, right? Especially in the Midwest where I grew up. And the
Mm-hmm.
cool thing is, there's companies now like the Ardent who,
Right.
check them out if you have a chance. Ardent LLC, one of the coolest, like a cannabis easy bake oven where you can make
Mm-hmm.
like precisely, or about as close to you can get to like being exactly measuring how much THC is in each edible.
Right.
So homemade edibles have come a long way there. Whereas like there's been plenty nights where my fiance and I will like throw the medicated butter on the garlic bread. Next thing you know, it's like 6 hours later and I haven't gotten off the couch. But
Right.
it's like that door opening up. So many people's bad experience with edibles came from like many of the things societally today, misinformation and misunderstanding. Part of that being,
Absolutely.
okay, I don't like smoking weed and cannabis terrifies me, but I'm going to start with edibles. And as like, if it's some sort of like lighter type of feeling on the body. And that's absolutely not the case. Right.
Right.
And then
Oh,
the
yeah.
other piece of that is like not reading the instructions on the packaging that these companies by regulation put on there and go through a
Right.
lot of trouble to explain how it's going to impact you, and thinking that, okay, well, I just ate half this bar and it's been 35 minutes and I don't feel anything, so I'm going to eat more. And then all
Right.
of a sudden, next thing you know, you get that like panic attack feeling. And so, long story short, I'm really excited that just because they are moving content limitations from 50 to 100, they're still going to have those single use servings for folks that want to like take a lighter dose of edible.
Yeah.
But then for people like myself and my fiance, you, like, we're eating 50 milligrams, probably a swing there, and it's great. So
Yeah.
really, really excited to see that. And then, I mean, speaking of that, 50 to 100 goes into effect on April 1st, conveniently before 420. So that's great for the retailers out here.
Big time.
Because, I mean, and living in Oregon, man, I'll confidently say in like a little bit biased way, I've had an opportunity to try cannabis products from everywhere. And I think Oregon is way up there in terms of like quality.
Oh, yeah.
It's exciting to see, because as the newer, as one of the earlier on markets, right, for adult use cannabis, it's tough to turn a buck. California sees the same thing, right? Because there's a lot of saturation, there's a lot of products out there. So, I think opening the door and making it a little less specific will open room for more people to be successful. So I think
Oh,
there's like
yeah.
a lot of opportunity there.
Well, you're allowing for the user that, was appalled by those limits at first. It's like, wait a second. I smoke cannabis on a daily basis. You're telling me I can have an ounce that's overcharged, that's overpriced, and I'm paying taxes for said ounce? It's like, no. I think
Right.
moves like this are the state actually trying to help with the problem. It's going to bring a couple more people over from the illicit market, where again you're just going after milligrams and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's it. I wish we were going to see stuff like this happen in California. When it comes down to taxes and movements towards trying to bring more of the demographic in the door instead of limiting it, like what's happening and killing it through taxes.
Totally.
I wish we would follow more of what Oregon's doing.
It'll
Since
get
the
there,
beginning.
man. People are starting to level it out a little bit. It's like, I think while Reefer Madness is still very much alive, I think that states are learning from each other. They're seeing, there's business cases being made as to why we should make it a little less difficult for cannabis businesses to be successful, which is obviously a lot of the basis for this show, right?
Right.
But, like seeing things like, in July or on July 1st, they're going to actually they're changing the regs to where they want only 2 milligrams of THC per piece or serving and 20 milligrams per package for hemp and CBD products, is also a good step in that direction. And I think
Right.
that what that tells me as a consumer, right, and somebody that works in the industry, is that the regulators are starting to at least try to understand what makes sense from a regulatory standpoint in cannabis. And that's not like a universal statement, but like you see these little like inklings of like, oh, wow, we are listening to folks. This isn't just what we think is best. It's what we can determine is the best from actual data-driven findings. And so that to me, anytime you see change in regulation to relax things, it gets me super excited. And then obviously putting in those things to make it a little more well-governed to keep folks that are trying to bridge that gap and try cannabis for the first time and not lose their mind, knowing that they're usually going to start on the CBD side because it's the gluten-free of today's marketing buzzwords, right? You see CBD on everything, right? That's also very exciting too. It's merging those two together, and I think it's great.
Definitely. No, and steps forward, like you said. So it's a more inviting market, and realistically, that's what you need in order to get people from that illicit market into a more regulated and safe environment as far as tested products and that kind of thing, and a place that they can learn about those products. Right? Is
totally.
Essentially you can go online, you can learn from people who are putting out shows and doing all that kind of thing, but really it comes down to sourcing the product. Where can you get it? Is it a fake, as per the brand you just saw on the show, or did it come from a licensed medical marijuana, in most states, or a recreational cannabis store that actually is tested? And that's going to help a lot of people's first experience, whether they're looking for 2 milligrams or want to blow the roof off with 50 milligrams for the first time. Just put on a seatbelt.
I mean, it's kind of, everyone has to touch the hot stove at some point in time. You got to know what you don't like before you know what you do. And so I'm all in support of that process. And I mean, it's happening everywhere too. Speaking of everywhere, let's get to the Midwest, right? Illinois, we've got some Illinois updates for folks.
There it is. Yeah. And they're actually month after month, they're generating more taxes, and they're trying to create more social equity opportunities. Let's see, taxes generated and deposited to the controller totaled 387.7 million in 2020, right?
Totally.
That's not a bad number.
Let's see. To put that in perspective for everybody that's listening in, the state of Illinois did $1.4 billion in top line cannabis sales in 2021. And so when you think about what that represents in the idea that like in the global market, 17 billion, right? And then someone might fact check me. It's either North America or global. It's probably a bad thing for me to not be correct on, but it's a lot of weed, right? Selling a lot of weed. And the cool thing, especially as being a Midwest kid myself, man, is like Chicago's always kind of been like the New York or the LA of the Midwest. Like when we were growing up in Kansas City, like you want to get somewhere that's like a big city destination for a vacation on the weekend, it's Chicago, right? And so all things kind of like flow towards that. And to see, the Midwest buy into cannabis in the way that a lot of the coast, West Coast, and now obviously the East Coast with different regulation being passed and such, and states coming live like New York, New Jersey, et cetera. Really exciting time, man. And you think about what that means, right? When we talk about tax revenue, and that is an undeniable business case, right? And sight unseen, right? I'd be curious to see like what other industries are generating that sort of tax revenue outside of like, alcohol, which is a much smaller tax, right? I'd be very curious. Lotto tax, maybe, like what's coming close to cannabis in terms of money to the state for like a CPG. So if anybody out there knows, we'd love to run that down. Throw that in the chat. Because I can't imagine there's much up there. I mean, I'm trying to like quickly think of
what's getting taxed like us. I mean, in California, over here where we got a $75 billion surplus in the coffers, they're still taxing us to death right now. I wish we had more of a Oregon style, farmer style tax thing, because our farmers aren't really being incentivized. But really, again, actually, sorry for the the segue over to California, but in Illinois, one of the interesting part of the numbers that were presented was the fact that $943 million in the calendar year was from in-state consumers, versus just about half of that number was from out-of-state consumers, right? So what that tells us is that just because you're not in a state that's legal doesn't mean you're going to not consume cannabis. Same thing with Nevada. There's a couple different dispensary chains I know that set up specifically on the border of Nevada, near Utah, near these other places that don't have the laws, and they crush it on purpose with
Oh
out-of-state
yeah.
customers.
And I can tell you right now, dude, not that we, and I'll publicly say this, not that we would ever encourage anyone ever to drive across the state lines with cannabis, because you can't do that. That being said, the dispensaries that are closest to the areas where there aren't other dispensaries or there's no legal cannabis are the busiest
Mhm.
dispensaries in the country. And we have a ton of
Absolutely.
data behind that to show that, right? So, like on the border of Oregon, that's next to Idaho, on the border of, you think about things like in future legislation, right? When like you talk about the
Right.
rest of the Midwest and states like Texas and Kansas, where I grew up, right? Kansas, no medical cannabis program, where you got Missouri that's going to have more than likely adult use on the ballot, right? In this next year.
Mhm.
If you're Kansas, and I'm talking to you, Kansas, if you're Kansas and you don't pass a medical program and start on the hurry up offense to get towards a recreational or an adult use program
Right.
fast, you could launch a medical program in the next year. But if it happens before or right around the time that Missouri has an adult use program, people are going to drive across the state line and go get their products for cheaper and not pay for a medical card. And so now
Absolutely.
it's almost to the point where, like, if you're a state that's not going to be, and again, feel how you want to about the plant, feel how you want to about the industry, from a purely economic standpoint, there's a lot of people that are allowing pride and prejudice to get in the way of
Absolutely.
being successful in this industry in the state. And it's crazy to
Yeah.
me. But hey, some people get there, some people don't, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the numbers are stating it, and just like, thank you for the clarification. Is we're not encouraging anyone to drive over state lines. Not that I ever have.
Because I never have once, not one
Never have.
time, not a
Never have
singular
I
time.
flown with anything in my luggage either.
Never even
But
tried cannabis until I worked in the industry. 100%.
yeah, no. But when it comes down to it, is they're able to track this now. We have these numbers. We have
Totally.
those insights for the state tracking, and realistically, um, yeah, it's one of those things that the states are starting to realize. Is I don't know if it was New Hampshire. I think I'm not sure if we quoted him directly on this, but essentially, he was quoted saying that, you know what, it's happening all around us, and we're losing out on revenue. And so, from the very least, even if, like you said, if the politics don't get behind it, if you don't believe in the medicinal value, well, guess what? It's driving revenue, and at the very least, you're missing out on it for your state and your constituency now.
And it's like, to the point where, like you were saying, right? Like you're missing out, but to the point where even like future efforts are going to be almost a practice in futility, because as well as I do, even when you pass a medical program, it takes a year plus to get the doors open to any kind of legal cannabis sales. And then from that, they'll usually take like another year to like build the business case for recreational, right? Like not every state is South Dakota that goes straight to a rec program. There's a lot of things to iron out there. And like, I think that,
Right.
that's a perfect example, when not to be like state specific, but like of that type of policy and regulation that is maybe not necessarily in tune to what's been successful, but what other
Right.
folks think will be successful based on where there's very clearly like a formulaic thing that makes legal cannabis work in these newer markets, right? And you
Oh yeah.
see, and I think we talked about this before on the show, but like you'll see these states like modeling their policy. It's almost like the emulation thing with like video games, right? You take all the things you really like and leave out the things you don't. And so like in
Right.
Missouri, there's a lot of similarities there in policy to like Nevada, right? Same thing with Mississippi will be very similar to Missouri, because there's a lot of crossover and like regulation. The folks that are behind from like sponsoring and lobbying for these bills to get on the docket, et cetera. So like, ideally, we have folks that are working towards that. Okay, we learn from the mistakes and the things that worked well and the things that don't from these states, right? Now
Right.
we need to like have folks not think that but we're South Dakota, so we got to figure. No offense, South Dakota, we're so and so to get it figured out, because we know what we're doing. It just
Right.
there's a proven successful track record, and there's a non, and it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of continues to pan out over the next couple of years.
Oh, definitely. Well, and we got a couple people in the comments. It looks like they're both from Indiana. We got Here We Grow Wicked and Daniel Thorbeck, if I'm pronouncing
Totally.
that correctly. And when it boils down to it, it looks like Indiana might be putting together a state medical program as to where there's a waiting list. But is that a step forward, or are they just posturing now? We've got a lot of this electoral or the election, the midterm elections coming up, and a lot of the state level Senate and all those people posturing just to look good and get another term. I'm
Right.
not in tune with Indiana specifically, but I mean, really, are they behind the times, or are they dragging their feet on purpose?
I mean, it's always very easy, and shout out to the Indiana folks giving us love in the comments there. I chuckled pretty hard there at some of the sentiments that I won't repeat on air, but it's so interesting. Um, Posturing just happens at every level of policy, right? And it's like, are you saying this? And at least now in the world of fact checking, in the world of like where everything is so interconnected from like the internet and how you can access information, like it's easier to pick up on the posturing stuff, right? Like filibuster was just kind of a term up until the instant information age, right? Whereas like it's something you knew that happened in Congress, but you didn't really like put more thought to it than that. Whereas now on the state and local level, you start to see that these are things that actually really, really impact our daily lives. And I think people are getting sick of it. And so, if the government is for the people, by the people in the way that it truly is, then I think some of these things will start to turn around. But that proving
Right.
ground is like becoming more prevalent now than ever,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well,
Absolutely, man.
and that leads us over to the New Hampshire market, right? Where the House of Representatives are Republican majority, New Hampshire state representatives are finally getting out of their own way over there, right? And they're saying
Yeah.
it's time to well, they sponsored a bill first of all, and it's time to put it on the ballot coming up here. So they're going to be doing the adult use, 21 or older, to be carry and gift a maximum of 3/4 of an ounce. Ooh, there we go with those limits again, and cultivate a
Yep.
maximum of 6 plants. Yeah, that's the tough part. Is are they how thoroughly are they going to follow through with the ticketing and the I don't know. That's a tough thing to
And
put
I
those type of
and
limits on people.
I'm sure my face says it, right? But like, where did 3/4 of an ounce come from? Like, where did that number? We said, we're gonna have a little roulette wheel, and we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna decide how much cannabis folks are able, what the volume of cannabis folks are able to carry on them as an adult use customer, and it landed on 3/4 of an ounce. Is that how we
I,
got there? Because like,
I get yeah.
where's the danger in those extra 8 grams, right? Where's the
Right.
danger in those extra 7 grams if it's quarters, right? So it's like, come on, that was really terrible math for somebody that's worked in cannabis for as long as I have. So I just want to make sure I get the record straight that 3/4 of an ounce, if we're taking away 1/4 of it, it would be 7 grams we are taking away. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, anyways.
Yeah. No, I could almost see them saying, back when I was getting it, it's a 3-finger lid would be about that would do it, so they visually, so 3/4 of an ounce. Hey, that looks about right.
Totally.
But yeah, there's
And
nothing more.
I think
Yeah.
they quoted Max Abramson, you know what I'm trying to say. He said
Hmm.
he's the Republican senator. It's it's not, and it never has been, the job of the government to protect you from hurting yourself. So,
Right.
that I believe in wholeheartedly, right? The government is here to protect us, right? But not to like protect you from hurting yourself, right? People are going to self-destruct on their own. Honestly, if we could apply
Right.
that sentiment more broadly in life today, I think that'd be a pretty solid construct there. But in general, like as human beings, right, we just have to make better decisions and like use common sense. So much of that comes from better information.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you're seeing some of that unravel over there back in the Oregon market. You guys are getting a little bit into laws that reflect that adult use recreational type laws, to where the laws allow and permit for different type. Wasn't everything legalized there in certain parts
So
of
yeah,
Oregon?
so and this is one of the few super policy related things I am pretty familiar with because it's interesting. And I think we might have talked about this with Steve, who will be on the
Yeah.
show next week. But Oregon's stance on it's not necessarily adult use of drugs, right? It's decriminalization. So no longer is somebody going to prison or jail for like having a small amount of like heroin or whatever on them, right? Because ultimately they made the decision similar to like, you know, I think I made the correlation with Zappos, right? Zappos is a very abstract company. They did things in a very different way. I actually, when I worked in HR tech, they were one of our customers. You know, Tony Hsieh, RIP, literally one of the most visionary CEOs of big business of our time, from like a humane perspective. When you talk about putting money back into the community in Las Vegas where they were at, no one better. But, you know, there was a point in time where they did away with all hierarchy in Zappos. So nobody had titles. Everything was like pods focused on particular projects. And so without titles and without a hierarchy, they gave everybody in the company an opportunity to say, okay, you know, this is our way we're moving forward. Titles are going away. If you no longer want to be a part of the company based on this, we'll give you a severance package equivalent to your time being here. And you can actually come back and reapply for your job in 18 months. And so that's a super abstract thing in corporate America. And the reason they did that is because these like employee attrition things are such a monumental problem in business that there had to be a better way to set that up. On the same side of that coin, but on the drug use side in Oregon, right? We're putting all these people, as we talk about often, in prison for use of personal amounts of what would be considered Schedule I drugs, right? And you know, you've got these for-profit prison systems, and you've got all these folks that are filling up the prisons when really they really need some help. Maybe they have an addiction and they don't have, you know, they're not selling product, right? They're buying product because they have an addiction, and it's a very tough mental thing to break. So point being, now Oregon will no longer, as long as it's a personal use of really any type of drug, and I'd have to get the list, but I think it's almost everything. It's a fine, and you have to go to a class from like a rehabilitation standpoint, and that's it. No jail time, no anything. And the proof of the pudding there is going to kind of come out over the next year. But I would be very, very willing to bet that it has the impact from like a level of like, you know, drug related arrests, from the you know, ability to like get folks back on their feet, and it's going to be documented in folks that come to facilities, because I think there's also a limit on how many times I believe you can be on that side of it. But like, point being is, it's like an abstract way of looking at it, and like, why not, right? The war on drugs, drugs won, right? Very clearly. Like, there's been so many types of like different types of failed policy and money thrown at this, and time and energy, and it's like, for what? What's that really changing? You know what I mean? And, you know, anyways, I'm excited to see more things like that. You know, Oregon's kind of always been on like the front end of progressiveness and progression in terms of like things up here. So like, it'll be interesting to see how if that pans out the way we expect it will, but I tend to believe it will.
Yeah, be interesting to see that. Well, and you know, it's the progression that is going to make it overall safer for people, you know, that within cannabis, within that stuff that you heard about in the Midwest. I can't remember exactly what state we were talking about it, but triple homicide over cannabis, you know, and then it was his dad and his two kids, you know, and it's like, well, the only thing we know about that is it happened in an illegal state. It happened in a state where there was no medical laws and there was no recreational laws, and it's still a commodity as part of the drug war, right? And you know, you got to take that out of it, and really, it's not that you're seeing less people get robbed over here. There's a lot of stuff happening in California, you know, and there's crazy stuff happening in Oregon, but it's what it is it's a swinging pendulum. It's that moment in time where, you know, it's going from being an illicit trade to being something that is being made available for public consumption. And hey, are you ever going to get rid of the illicit market on all levels? Absolutely not. It's always going to be there, and people are going to do what they want based on that. But for the masses and for public consumption, there should be some level of safety and security and regularity and normalizing to that, especially surrounding cannabis, right?
You know, you know, one of the things, I agree with you, man. I think one of the things that is going to help help kind of quell the illicit market kind of once and for all is a more universal stance on cannabis, obviously the basis of this show, right? And like, the taxes won't always need to be this high, right? Like, if you have, you know, of the 50 nifty, right, all with an adult use program that are contributing tax revenue, you know, that's actually going to be far better. Think about it this way. If you had 100 sales at a 20% tax rate, or 1,000 sales at a 10% tax rate, totally different thing, right?
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. But then like, like the same reason why, moonshine and the bootleggers and all those things that happened, right? And those only existed because of the prohibition of alcohol. Now the prohibition of alcohol goes away, and then all of that goes up into thin air. Now you can still get some pretty solid moonshine. I got some friends in Virginia that his family's been making moonshine for generations, right? And that's great. But like, it took a while to get there, and it's like I just truly hope that like we don't put ourselves in a position to fail because we keep the tax rate so ridiculously high to prove that point. Like, it's like, folks, like the $90 eighth is just not where it's at. That's just not, and especially when like you're able to. So I think that will all start to subside as we get there. Hopefully, fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that here in California it doesn't wait until next year when the bigger money is allowed into the state, right? And it sure feels like a planned suffocation over here, but I'll save that for a different story here. But yeah, really, it's being taxed to death. I mean, it doesn't even farmers can't even make distillate for the distillate cost of prices right now in the state. It's the taxes eat all that up if you yield under a certain percent. They just have to burn up. The state would rather them burn the product if they don't get their taxes than them actually figure out a way to do something and live off of it. So it's
for sure.
something there.
And then ideally, oh dude, and then like ideally you see some of these states that disallow vertical integration to actually start allowing it too. Because like not saying you should require vertical integration, but to be at least permissive of it is a huge thing. Because, like you've got these companies that are forced to like play the wholesale game, and the cost of that product is, selling it to yourself is far cheaper, obviously, both from like on the books, it's going to actually make the business more successful, which generates more tax revenue. But again, all of that kind of circles back to what I feel like has become our central theme of today is like, let's get people making policy that understand the space, right? Like, let's start seeing more policy rolled out that is congruent with like the growth and direction of the space, because what was important yesterday isn't important today. What's important tomorrow isn't important yet. And if we don't take that type of approach on just about everything, at least from like a due diligence standpoint, we're putting ourselves in a tough spot.
Absolutely. And that's why conversations like we have with Mr. Hawkins and the people who help the policymakers see what we need them to see are so important, right? And I guess this is a good time to let people know that Mr. Bond won't be here next week with us. I won't put out the personal stuff, but he won't be here.
Oh, I'm going snowboarding. I wish I could be here, but I'll be snowboarding. And it's only because I haven't gotten to go yet, and I've had the trip. But I'll be in Durango on a mountain with some of my buddies that I played ball with in college. So it'll be a good time for sure. And if any of them are watching this, I'm coming to dust them on the mountain too. So best believe old boys showing up. No questions asked. Totally.
Nice. So and we'll be having our sit-in over here at the office. We'll be having Jason Kitamura join us with Steve Hawkins, and we'll be going over things. And Jason is going to be bringing an interesting perspective as per his cannabis industry. History is basically here with Trichomes. Everyone knows about cannabis at a certain point in their life and whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean you come in contact with it outside of maybe seeing other people use it, this or that. So he'll bring a different perspective and maybe some different questions for Mr. Hawkins next week. So I'm excited about that. And then when we get back, we will, I think third weekend, we're going to be visiting with Casey Lee from Bloom Brand. He'll bring some interesting subjects to the table as far as trademarks and pivots, because they've been in the middle of a pretty successful one, if I'm not mistaken. When it comes down to branding and the traditional markets,
Bloom's crushing it, man. They're doing very, very well. Oh yeah, totally.
Definitely. So we've got a great month coming up here. Again, want to notify everybody who's watching that we've got some new shows coming out. So look for the promos on that, and look for some links. Thank you for everybody who's been in the comments over here. We enjoy everybody that throws the comments up. I know we missed a couple of questions, but we'll try to circle around on a weekly basis and answer those. Either that or get back into the live chat comments and respond to them later. But Yeah, I'm not sure if that's about all we got from this side.
That's all we got today, man. It's a new year, dude. We don't have a ton to talk about yet, but it's going to compound, dude. It'll snowball. We'll be on here for 3 hours before the year's out, man. So I'm not worried about it. There will always be more to talk about. So totally, man.
So when are we getting you back here in the studio? Next month?
You know what, dude? Hoping next month. Actually, I've got to look at the calendar, and I think I'm good for a SoCal trip in the middle of February. So we'll definitely have to make it happen. Be able to smoke some weed on the podcast, right?
Yeah, we'll see if we can get a couple other people in here, and we'll have a 70s style round table, 70 show style round table, right?
I like that, man. Totally. Absolutely.
Nice. All right,
man.
Well, again, thanks to everybody who's been watching and viewing with us live here. Look forward to catching up with you guys next week. John, don't break a leg. Go out there and shred up the mountain.
Do not break a leg. Totally, man.
Not break a leg. You're not an actor. Don't break your leg.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. I'll catch everybody in 2 weeks, and everyone else Jarod and team will see you back here next week.
Sounds great. Have a great one, everybody.
Later.
Thanks, John.